time, if you're here, if you're watching, leave us a comment, say hi, tell us where you're watching from, and let us know if you have any questions about entrepreneurship, about coaching, anything that sort of comes up for you during the live today. Shoot us a question and we'll see it and we'll answer it on the call today. So Jennifer, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. This you've been
good. And you're in, remind me.
I am in Dallas.
How is it out there today?
It's good. I mean, this time of year, of course, it's always very hot and humid, but that's okay. I enjoy the heat.
Nice. Nice. It's we're in the middle of a heat wave in New York, so we have Dallas here represented today. We have New York represented, and sometimes we get people from Asia and Europe watching, and we had somebody from Australia watching the other day, and that was pretty cool. So hopefully we'll get some folks on here, and we'll get started in just a minute. And I'm just going to take a peek on LinkedIn and make sure the connection is indeed working. 1 second. All right, and it seems like we're live, so cool.
Awesome.
All right, so at any time during the live, if you're watching, feel free to throw in your questions. Let us know if you like something or if you something resonates with you. Feel free to throw it in the chat. We will see you here on Restream. As always, thank you to Restream for helping us get live every day. And Restream is a multi-streaming platform, so I highly recommend it. So everybody, officially welcome to Coffee with Entrepreneurs Live. Today I'm here with Jennifer Thornton. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Jennifer, how do you take your coffee? And if you don't drink coffee, how do you start your day?
Well, I actually don't drink coffee. Coffee's never been my thing, but I do love hot tea.
Nice.
And so I brought my tea to our conversation and start our morning with our caffeine rush.
Nice. So hot tea in Dallas. Wow. That's a great choice. You don't find that it gets too hot for you?
Well, in the winter, it's fantastic. I will say that in the summer, I do let it set for a while.
Nice. Gotcha. Well, I love tea. In my house, my housemates and I, we drink tea every night. So in these months with an ice cube in it. So awesome. So tell us a little bit about you, your business, and what it is that you're doing these days.
Yeah, so I am the owner and founder of 304 Coaching. Before doing that, I spent a lot of years and it was fantastic. I learned a lot. I grew a lot. I was able to do so many great different types of positions, different types of industries. My last chapter, my corporate career, I was able to work internationally with a large retailer and run them internationally, which was thrilling. I got to do short-term stays in amazing countries around the world, like Hong Kong and London. So if we have anyone from Asia, Hong Kong is my home away from home. Love it there. It's an amazing place. But after doing that for a lot of years, I wanted to go and help organizations in a very specific way. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about and what we spend our time here at 304 doing is really helping organizations understand what talent strategy do they need so that their business strategy actually comes to life. And when I talk with entrepreneurs or any type of companies that have a business, when they start to talk to people about their challenges, it's people. It's always, trying to figure out how to develop people, how to find the right people, how to figure out what the people should be actually doing,
Yeah.
all of those types of things. And, the biggest challenge out there is people do strategies that match their business strategies. And that's what we help people do.
I love that. And so, at the bottom, at the core of every issue in a business, whether it's a good issue or a bad issue, is the people, right? Because people do things, they're complicated, and of course you have to build a great culture and everything like that. So when it comes to talent strategies, what sorts of things do you recommend to folks that are, when they call you and you come in and you get started with an organization, where do you usually start?
Yeah, I usually start with the executive team. And it's important to start there because they are setting the organization and the for the organization. And, oftentimes I find that when you bring a collective group of executives together, show up to the executive role, they really are wearing the hat of vertical, whether that's the finance vertical or marketing or human resources or sales, whatever that is. And so they table with those, with that kind of lens and filter. And what I really start to do is help organizations understand that you show up without that lens, you show up to focus on the business, and then you take those thoughts and those brainstorming and those commitments and those strategies as a collective group, and then you take those down within your group. And that allows executives to really start to focus on the business and making sure their vertical is meeting those needs. And it sounds very simple, and most people think they're doing that. But when we stop with the executives and we ask the questions and we chat around that table, pretty soon we find that it's not as easy as everyone thinks it is.
Right, exactly. And if it was easy, everybody would do it, and we'd all have perfect companies, right?
I know, right? Wouldn't that be? I'd be out of a job, and that would actually be okay.
Right.
The world would be a better place.
Right. We'd all be happy in our jobs. It would be great, So what are some common issues that you see when you go in?
Yeah, I think some of the common issues I see is if you're in a fast-growing company, you're growing so fast that you just keep hiring people. There's a pain, and you're like, oh, well, we'll just hire someone. And you start kind of what I call throwing payroll at the problem. And so many times companies don't take the time to stop and really think about the work that needs to be done and think about how the work can be done, really determining if the work is required or if it's a vanity piece. So often we think must get done is really vanity work, and it's not driving the business. And so we really start with looking at the work and how could that work in the most efficient way, and then how do we hire in that instead of just keep hiring and hoping our problems will go away, which is what a million out there do. They just keep hoping those problems will go away, and they don't.
That's great. So how do you know if you're doing that? Hiring in the hopes of making some problem, the vanity work go away. What are some signs that executives can look for? Oh, great.
The first sign to look at is, it's at your door all the time and saying, hey, we've got a problem, so-and-so's overworked and so-and-so is struggling here. And so we have to, if that conversation is happening frequently, it's time to put the brakes on it and really look at the work. And because oftentimes we do need to hire new people, but how and when those people, and how do we need to rearrange the work? The other thing I find is oftentimes people feel like they need more support and overwhelmed because they haven't been properly educated on how to do their job. And there's efficiencies in the workplace that need to be corrected. And if corrected those efficiencies and started to look at development and training, which is a much more financially sound decision, and going and hiring an additional person, often frustration and that overwhelm starts to go away. And when people are actually really efficient and love their jobs, and when that fear of overwhelm goes away, they actually their efficiencies because they're no longer functioning in fear and, kind of going up against those chemicals in their mind that down their prefrontal cortex.
Nice. so you mentioned vanity work, and you know, when you say that, what comes to mind is like the busy work. You know, as a business owner, I think of, you know, kind of the things that I'm like struggling to do at the end of the day, and or you know, the things that put off my real work, right?
Yeah.
How can we hire well so that we take that off our plates?
Yeah, I think one of the first things to do is really decide what is vanity work in an organization, because that can look different for different people. Oftentimes when I'm talking with companies that where we are working through talent strategy, I hear things like, you know, oh, this report really doesn't matter. It doesn't really connect anything. It's duplication of this report, but I see it this way, so I go ahead and do it that way. And I'm like, okay, well, how many hours? Well, it's 3 hours a week. Well, that's a lot of hours over a year we're working on. So a CEO can see something that's specific the way they want to see it versus a report that's on. And that's vanity work.
Right.
It's not signing up to learn something new, so that and then that causes others to work extra hard.
Right, and I'm sure it's not good for morale, because if you know the work that you're doing doesn't matter, it's hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you're not signed up to do it, obviously you're not going to do it to that level, and then the important stuff gets pushed off the plate. And the stuff that really needs to be done is that stuff that you talked about at the end of the day, that to-do list that needs to get done, the stuff that truly will drive the business. Take out vanity work, and people are really doing the work that they know makes they show up in a whole new way.
I love that. And, you know, we all want our businesses to be more successful. So what are the common issues do you see when you go into an organization? What are executives not doing that they could be doing, for instance?
Yeah, I think another common issue that I see that we talk a lot about is, how do we really open up our mind from those around us? The person closest to the customer knows the right answer, but oftentimes as executives, we don't take the time to talk to those people. And so what happens, executives, what I find, and there's studies and around this, is our minds actually get addicted to being right. And so it's dopamine hit, and it feels really darn good, right? And we're excited. Like we get a dopamine hit if we take our great coffee or sugar or alcohol, whatever our addiction is. And so what happens is these executives get to be right a lot in their career. That's how they got to the top, because they were really good at what they did. But what that's created is an addiction, and that addiction to being right. And what happens is, if someone starts to challenge what you think is right, then that starts to pull away from your dopamine hit, and your mind will kind of trick you and say, no, that person is wrong. You're right, aren't you? Yes, you're right. And so that you continue to get that dopamine hit. And what happens, and I see this time and time and time again, is I'll go and talk with executives after having conversations, and I'll start asking questions, and they'll say, oh, well, that's not true, and that's not accurate, and that's a lie. And then I'm like, well, okay, let's talk proof. Let's pretend as if we know nothing, and let's look at some facts and figures and proof. And when we start that, their minds completely open up, because it's on being right, that they haven't been able to hear from their company, they haven't been able to hear from their customers. And especially if your top 2 or 3 are really addicted and holding firm to what they believe, and they're not willing to hear others, and they're not willing to hear their business will suffer greatly.
So that sounds like a common problem. Am I right about that?
It is.
You know,
Absolutely.
Because as business owners, as executives, you're right. We've gotten there. Part of the reason we've gotten to where we are is because we're right a lot, right? So
yes.
I love that. So how can both others in the organization and the executive themselves that's addicted to being right, how can some checks be put into place?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, if you are in a senior throughout the rest of this week, after you listen to this conversation, what I ask you to do is be a student of yourself, outer body experience, and wash yourself in as you engage and in your work environment. How often are you asking questions? Often are you saying a whole different perspective I've never heard of? Or how often are you saying, hey, that's not how I see it, but change my mind. I'm open to it. Change my mind. So that you can really have a good debate, a different viewpoint. And if you're going home at the end of the day and you're saying to yourself, wow, I taught everyone everything they needed to do, I'm the smartest person in the room, then you have some addiction issues. You need to be going home saying, man, those are some really robust conversations. I was really challenged in my thought. I learned something new that I hadn't thought of from a customer's viewpoint that I'd never seen before. And so those are kind of the checks and balances that an executive put in place with themselves to ensure they really are keeping their mind open to what is truly going on in their organization so they can make powerful and effective decisions.
That's great. And what are the results that you see when people do put these checks in place?
So many great things start to happen, and it's kind of a snowball effect. So the first thing that starts to happen is people are like, but they really want to know the truth, and so they kind of very easily ease into the water and make sure they don't get in trouble, because typically over time, if we've had then people are in trouble for telling their viewpoints. And so we have to kind of work through that and make that safe place. Over time, we start to see people use their voices. We start people become more in tune with what the customer needs or what the business needs, because they know that when they know what that is, that they can share that. And so if you're being dictated to and being told, don't think, use my thoughts, you're not thinking about the business. You're only executing, and you're charged with thinking about the business and being required to go to the table with new ideas and new viewpoints and really challenge yourself and others in the way. Then you start to pay attention in a whole different way, and you become invested in the organization because you truly are making an impact, and people want to make an impact when they go to work.
I love that. So in terms of employee engagement, what sort of differences do you see when an executive sort of stops being addicted to being right, or at least checks themselves on it?
Yeah, I think the engagement changes. Obviously, now they're getting involved in the thought of the business. They become more innovative because they want to solve the problems. And when they get some of those innovation wins, obviously that morale goes up and that engagement. Typically, when that paradigm starts to shift, the employees have better relationships with the leaders, whether that's their manager, their director, their executive, because they're having conversations without fear. They're being able to use their viewpoints without fear. These relationships that are really deep and meaningful. And obviously, if you have a really deep and relationship with your boss where you're growing mentally and you're getting stretched and you're growing, you're going to show up and you're going to want to stay at that job. And so it's interesting that people are always saying, how do I want to hire the right people so they don't quit. I have to lead them so they don't leave the company. We have to make sure that we're being great leaders and we're allowing them to engage and function inside of the group.
I love that. And, I'm curious how, I know I've been an entrepreneur for some time, but I know that I've had bosses that were addicted to being right. I know that there have been times when I've been addicted to being right. I'm sitting here.
We all have.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. We all have it, right? So, I'd love to hear from people if you're watching or if you're watching the replay. Does this resonate with you? Because I know it's resonating with me. And, it's taking some sort of honest self-talk here for me to say that, right? So I appreciate that you do this and that you help executives with this, because it's something we could go our whole lives without realizing, So what other common issues do you see in organizations, and have you seen anything sort of new pop up due to the pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of newness coming up. The really beautiful, well, there's nothing beautiful about COVID-19, but has, what it's caused people to do is they can't, there's no playbook on this. And so it's actually removed some of that addiction because no one has dealt with this. No one knows what's best to do, building the airplane as it's flying. And so it's actually starting these really great conversations and, saying, oh, we're doing focus groups and we're asking people to do surveys, and that's not practices they before. And so it's actually teaching people to open up conversations because we are all setting in the unknown right now. And
Right.
So it is a byproduct of the situation. Hopefully what that's doing is creating these new relationships and these new habits around using our voices in the workplace and asking questions long after, we have found solution of how to manage the pandemic.
Has your business pivoted due to the pandemic?
No, we actually, what we do around talent strategy, we have continued to do because strategy has always been important. But when the rug was pulled out of so many organizations and the way they had done business was, ripped away from them over, and actually had to focus on talent strategy. And the talent strategy was the only way they were going to make sure that their business was viable long term. And so actually because we've got to have more conversations on the team and how we're taking care of our employees, how we are organizing the work, what work is important, what is not, help people work and balance their needs outside of work. For the first time ever, I'm having conversations with clients about, we have working parents when it's unknown. How do we start to manage that? How do we help people get their work done, but also provide education to their children? That's not an option we had this time last year when the school was going back. And so there's a lot of new conversations. So the pivot is really where we're more relevant than we've ever been. And, I'm hoping that those habits stick.
I love that, and of course, every crisis has good things that come out of it, right? Hopefully, and
Absolutely.
It seems like this is one of them where we're starting to focus on, making sure that we take time off when we're not feeling well, or
Yes.
more of a renewed focus on family and everything like that. What are some things that you see that companies and executives are doing right?
Yeah, I think what they're doing right is they're thinking about the health of their employees foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take care of the employees, they will your business. And so, in fact, I was out yesterday and, masked up and all of the things I need. I had to go out and purchase something. And I was watching, how was this retailer taking care of their employees, and they were doing a lot of stuff. And I came to the cashier and I was like, wow, it seems like, your company has put a lot of things in place to help protect you. And she's like, I didn't think I wanted to come back to work, but all the stuff they were doing for me, I came back to work. I feel really safe being back at work. And so, I love talking to that person at the register when I'm shopping, because that's the company brand, is that person.
Yeah.
And so, what I heard yesterday was this company had taken care of the health and safety of this employee, which made her want to work. She had given me great service. I bought more than I expected to buy. And so because they took care of her, she took care of the company. Had a decent sale because I came in and she was happy to help me and felt comfortable and had the precautions and safe to do it, in a healthy way.
What a beautiful example. I mean, because if the frontline employee, that's like the sort of, if they're taking care of the cashier, right, everybody else is taken care of. Mm-hmm. So that's amazing.
Absolutely. That's yeah. And you think about it, all those decisions that were made at the executive table, the extra cost or whatever it was costing the company, they had to say, let's take care of the employee first. that trickled down into the experience, and that trickled to a positive effect on their business. But if they had sat at that table and said, you know what, we got to save money, we got to protect the people, or we can't worry about the people, they should go back to work, and they weren't thinking about the people, the experience I had would have never come true.
Yeah. That's beautiful. What a great example. What else are you focused on these days? What sort of issues are you seeing come up due to the pandemic?
Yeah. One of the things that we're hearing a lot about right now in the workplace, and started hearing about it probably in the last year or so, is safety in the workplace. And that goes back to making sure that people feel that they live in a place where they can use their voice, that there's trust, that part of a collective group works tightly together. And when you think about psychological safety, you're really working in how the brain works, science of the brain. You're not thinking about it from like that old school, well, give good feedback and they'll be great. No, it's really thinking about how do you create psychological safety on the neuroscience of the brain. And we started seeing that crop up quite a bit over the last couple of years. I studied under an amazing woman, Judith Lasher, for about a year and a half. She spent 40 years studying the neuroscience of the mind and the workplace. And it was really some early work on psychological safety and trust. And, after I met her and started studying underneath her, it changed how I looked at everything and being right. And I thought back to myself and some of the things I'd done in my career and thought, wow, I could have been better. But we're growing humans, and we can always growing and get better. But I think psychological safety was kind of that. And obviously right now with the pandemic, it's more important than ever.
How can executives, if they already didn't have a culture of psychological safety, because of course that's easier said than done, what are some of the first steps that we can take? Yeah,
some of accepting people's reality. And so often when someone comes to your office and they're upset about something, they need a mistake or a problem in the business, they're scared to do it because they don't know what your reaction is. And so one of the ways to create psychological safety is to be supportive in times of crisis, because you're going to be told about the crisis earlier and they're honest with you about the crisis. You're not going to get the watered down version, and you're not going to get it 2 days late because people spent 2 days trying to figure out how to tell you the information, fix it behind your back. And then in those 2 days, who knows how you could have helped them. But that's one of the biggest things is how do you handle it when someone comes to you and says, there's been a problem and I need to tell you about it. If you can be supportive, if you can provide safety, if you can jump in and say, team right now, let me help you solve it. And don't judge. Later after it's solved, go back and say, let's recreate this and look to where and so don't start pointing fingers in the moment, because you're solving nothing when you're doing that.
I love that. And my gosh, that's hard work. That's really hard. But it's important.
It's hard.
Amazing. So what should I have asked you that I haven't asked you?
Oh, I always love that question. I ask it myself. I think that how does an executive create this? But if you're an employee out there and you want to create a better relationship with your boss, because this relationship goes two ways. And I think that's sometimes what we forget to talk about is how does the individual start to create that new and supervisor.
So how does an employee do that? Maybe they're in an environment that doesn't have a lot of psychological safety, or, their boss is addicted to being right. How do they empower themselves and also empower their employer?
So you have to be at that place where you are confident in a business situation. So it could be, there's been a crisis, or you see something in the workplace that if you really got up the nerve and had that tough conversation, you could impact the business. And so find that first kind of break. You can't just kind of break in without purpose. Find that first like nugget that you can kind of hold on to be strategic around to start to change the relationship. And so let's just pretend it is, a product that's good, but you know how to make it great, and you know it will sell better, and no one's been wanting to really hear it. Then go into your supervisor or to the person who's appropriate to have that conversation with and say, hey, today I'd love to spend time brainstorming about how to drive the business that I really believe would change our results. We could increase this product by 10 months. I've worked out the numbers. Are you willing to hear me today, completely open-minded, to look at this strategy I put together to increase this product by 10%? Can you do that with me today? I guess people will probably say, yeah, I'll take that, sure. But it's a very different than just saying, hey, I don't think this works, and that's really dumb, and I don't know why they built it that way. And I'm going to want to have a conversation around that. Really changing how you approach, and then if you go in and you have that amazing opportunity, and then you're brainstorming, you're not addicted to how you're open to saying, here's a starting point, and going back and forth, then you're starting to create this back and forth push-pull conversation around bringing and driving a product to a new place. And that starts the habits. And if it doesn't work the first time, don't give up. It takes a long time to change a culture, but people have one conversation and say, oh, it didn't work. And they go back to their desk and they shut down and they never try it again. And then they think it doesn't work. Well, we have to continue to practice and get better over time to make those changes happen.
Well, it sounds like to me, reframing the conversation for the employee, right? Even if it doesn't work for the first time, reframing it around, I can help the business is a really powerful, because what executive doesn't want to hear that? What owner doesn't want to hear that? And even if they don't listen the first time, well, you're not saying, hey, you're not listening to me, or hey, there's no sort of, it takes the personalization out of it. So I love that, and I think it's a really empowering way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you are a leader and you're looking at your team and you've been saying to yourself, they don't have fresh ideas, and they're never thinking, well, it's probably because you don't allow it, because minds do think of new things. They just don't share it. And so if you're saying that to yourself, get a timer and tell the team, we're going to show up at this time on this day. I'm going to be in lunch. We're going to throw everything on the table that we know, and we're going to put this product together. And I want you to come up with the craziest ideas that you think would just be nuts. I want you to bring stuff like, we're going to take this product to Mars. So when you tell people you want them to come with off-the-wall answers, you'll be surprised how many of those off-the-wall answers actually aren't that bad and might actually work. But you're telling people, I want you to be just nuts. Like, just think of the craziest thing, because it opens up the mind to go from, oh, do I really have a new idea? Is it really okay? You're like, well, it's nuts. He said nuts, so I'm going to bring in nuts. And so it allows them up in a whole different way than, hey, bring 3 good ideas that will work on driving this. That's never going to happen. Just tell them, bring it all. Bring the crazy. Yeah. Interesting. And if you do that, if you're listening and you do that, let us know what happens, because there's some of the best meetings I've ever run is when I tell people, bring the craziest idea you've ever thought of to the table and let's reconstruct it.
Well, I love that, and I think it sounds funny and we're laughing, and it's kind of, it sounds a little silly, but actually, in my past life I was a jazz musician, and so the best jazz musicians were the ones who were willing to make mistakes in their improvisation, because that was what created these new things, right? Created these new sounds, and they were the ones who were the most successful in the end. And so, actually it's funny, because when you're too square, you're afraid, you never color outside the lines and you're improvising, right? And so, you know, you like never come up with anything new or anything like that. So actually what you're talking about is proven, right? If you're not willing to kind of throw out your crazy ideas, you're never going to get to the heart of something that you might not have otherwise. Like, you know, I might throw out the crazy idea, like, let's take our product to Mars as an example. Well, maybe we can't actually do that, but maybe we could, I don't know, create an app that talks to the Mars rover, or whatever the case is, right? Yeah. So I love that idea. I mean, I have a virtual team, but I'm going to implement that because I love that.
Good. Yeah. I think it's also fun. I worked with the organization and we had to really think about, they were kind of dying. They thought about and it was, you know, as an outsider, it's always easy to come in and see, oh, well, it's because you haven't allowed people to come up with ideas. And so we bring your creative ideas, we're throwing on the table. But what we also did is we created an award for the most ridiculous idea. And we told people, we're going to get an award out for the most ridiculous idea. So it was, and what it did is it brought fun and humor, and people thought, well, I guess if it's ridiculous, it's okay because I might award. And it really pushed people's brains to think about it in just the craziest and newest ways. And they learned so much out of that session, and it was fantastic. And they all left laughing and feeling good. And you know, and if we're all leaving the boardroom excited to get back out and feel good, that is a much better day than how boardroom. Yeah.
And it sounds like a way not to have just another boring board meeting, right? You know, or another team meeting. Especially these days when we're all zoomed out and we're all really tired of being on video chat and everything like that. You know, if we could be giving out awards for craziest idea, you know, what else might come out of that meeting? So that's wonderful.
What else? Yeah.
That's great. So how can people get in touch with you?
So you can get in touch with me here on LinkedIn. If you're watching on LinkedIn, you can find me, Jen Thornton, ACC. And that is my LinkedIn profile. So send me a connection request. Say hello, say that you need to hear our conversation here. I'd love to hear more about your business and how I can help you think of the craziest ideas ever to drive your business. Just reach out, say hello. You can also learn more about the company at 304coaching.com.
Amazing. Jen, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm excited to go ask my team to come up with the craziest idea ever.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It was so good talking to you, and have a fantastic day.
You too.